All right, so at this stage, I want you guys to get the full form down on paper, right? We talked last week about shapes, and hopefully you started to notice some of this on your characters, right? As you were developing them or as like ideas came to you, right? You put it down on paper initially, right? When you're just throwing thoughts down on paper, um, you want to stay in a non-judgmental zone, right? You don't want to be like critiquing your own work too early. Um, Understand that it's part of the process, right? It's kind of like it's the same as game design or game jams, right? We judge things at the end when we know the parameters that went into them, and we judge them differently when we know more about the process. Yeah, so we're still in the phase of learning the process, right? We're not all experts here, and character design is one of the trickier specialisms in general, right? It's one of the higher paid ones because people who can do it at a fast pace, at high quality, right? Working in different styles, it's a lot of rare talents and gifts coming together, and it's a lot of hard work, right? It's years and years of study and practice. So if we're not doing the practice, yeah, we're not going to get much better. Hopefully, just doing a few hours this week, or hopefully you do at least an hour. Um, yeah, your first few sketches were going to be junk, just like mine were, right? Because like your wrist is still stiff. You're not like able to channel those thoughts and those feelings like through from your brain down to your drawing hand. Yeah, but as you warm up, right, like you get into that state of flow, and like we talked about yesterday, doing things like putting on some music or maybe meditating or clearing your mind a little bit beforehand does help with that kind of thing. So still consider these things as you move forward, right? Like I just mentioned, we're not married to these characters just yet or anything. We haven't put them into the technical side yet, right? We're just kind of free forming on paper. Um, so we can still look for opportunities to add more meaning to our character designs. And I would like to, chat with people one on one so that we can help find the best version of everybody's character. But looking at the chat, right, I can see that a lot of you guys were looking at and thinking about story already, right? Which is what we want. We want to think about like the specific time and place maybe that these characters are living, and what kind of job they have, right, or what their purpose is in the story, whether it's going to be action hero or scary monster lurking in the shadows, right, or like um, a more goofy character that's going to bring some comedy to the table. Yeah. So these are all really cool. And I encourage you guys that are feeling less confident in 3D, right, to exaggerate the proportions and things and make your characters a little more cartoony. Only two or three characters last semester or last year in the year twos or the year threes work. Only two or three of them, I think, were able to really go for a realistic looking character and pull it off. That's one of the toughest things that you can make in 3D. So think about old school 2D style, right? Because we are going to be seeing this from far away, right? Our characters, um, if we're looking at them on screen, are only going to be about 3 fingers high, maybe even 2 fingers high, right? They're going to be quite small if they're in a MOBA. Um, if we're worried about adding too many details, right? Small details are going to get lost in that distance, right? We want to try and think about where's the camera going to be, so that we can add the right amount of detail. Now, this is a bit tricky because we could take this character all the way through to the end. I don't always encourage you guys trying to hit the final project, by aiming at a target from like the beginning of the semester, right? And letting that arrow fly. Like if we work on these characters all semester, we're going to get bored with them, and the final result is going to mean a lot of like stopping and starting. So what I'd like to do is encourage you guys to make like a very low poly, rudimentary, basic version of your character first, and then decide, you know, in a few weeks, like, are you going to take this to your final animation and use that character, or are you going to make a new character, right? And since we're going to go through this process, it's going to be a lot easier the second time um, to model the character. Character Creator 3, I haven't seen that one in particular, Maria. Is this just like a base mesh slider base thing? Let me take a look. Oh, it's very pretty. It looks like it's spitting out complete characters though. So no, we're not gonna take that big of a shortcut. We're gonna take some shortcuts and gonna make things textured and things, but we're not aiming for that Character Creator 3 level of detail just yet. we gotta do some dry runs before we get to the crazy stuff. So I'll give you guys some tips along the way, but we're not even gonna jump into 3D yet, right? We're gonna think about our 3D in terms of what the story is going to be, right? And then we're going to use 3D as just like the way that we're presenting our story. But I'm not going to be looking super in detail at your character unwrap, or I want the overall effect to take precedent, right? And if you look at the VLE and the requirements for the project, I don't list a lot of sort of texture requirements and things, or fidelity, like quality level. I really want you guys to think about this in terms of like, okay, it's like a mobile game or something, and I'm trying to get something out, right? And on the table and in Unity working quickly, because that's what we did in 3D level design. I feel like that was a good test for a lot of people to get their own character into a game, right? It's tricky. You guys went through that already. So now we do it again, and we do it a little bit better this time. So the next thing we're going to start thinking about is the colors on our character and what those colors mean, right? If we're doing silly characters, maybe it doesn't feel like it's as important. But sometimes we want to give the character a little bit of mystery, or be able to communicate something about their personality without necessarily having to have them making a silly face, or giving them dialogue. There should be all of that visual information included within the design. Let me see if I can do I kind of want to do a full screen share just so I can swap back and forth to Photoshop, but let's go a couple more slides in. So we do need to think about what the colors mean when we're looking at different colors to put on our character. And like the other infographic here shows, right, there's this rule called the 60-30-10 rule, which is going to help us choose, which colors are the most important, kind of 60%. The supporting color is going to be, a lesser personality trait maybe of your character, and then a 10% just be like that extra little jab that pushes it across the line. So for instance, on my guy, right, I was playing around with my with like a Viking idea, and on my character right now, I've kind of got blue, I've got purple, and I've got red, but I'm ready to change that today, because really, when I look at the color wheel, those aren't really the colors that are expressive of this character's personality necessarily, right? He's more of a berserker, crazy guy over here on the red side, right? And the yellows maybe for energy, than he is necessarily in this kind of softer blue trust and honor type of character. Yeah. So it might seem a bit silly, right, to assign these directly, but this is something that's been studied in design, right, and it's commonly used in things like product design and web design, and they've proven the psychology behind it. So we're still thinking about story, right? So hopefully some of the lessons learned from story design, right, are going to come through here. I'm almost finished grading all of those. Sorry that everything got pushed back so far, right? Like I didn't have control over the IT systems either, um, and so grading got pushed back as well into the semester. And I really wish that that wasn't the case, but I'm really happy with what you guys did for the first time running that class, right? Like that was an experimental class and redesigning it from being a very like essay writing class, right? Which would have totally stumped you guys if you had to do recreation as well as like a whole story writing. But some of you guys got into it in interesting ways, and I had fun reading the stories. You know, like there's a lot of cool character backstories and things. Um, I'm not opposed if you want to develop some of those worlds a little more, right, and use those as frameworks. But it is a good habit to just create something new from scratch, right, and take the lessons learned from the previous course into the new class. So for the story, we want to think of very small moments though this time, right? I know I was thinking, you know, the story design stories were great, but we were focusing on that kind of big epic showdown, right? The boss showdown, um, where we have to have a lot of energy and motivation of these two characters that are gonna like butt heads at the end, right? Maybe I should do puppet shows over here. So for the our story, right? For our animation story, which is going to be our final. I should actually pull up the VLE. I have that open. Of course, it logged me out. Cool. So for the 15-second animation, 15 to 30-second, right? We have to introduce something, solve a problem, and get out right within 15 seconds. Like it's not a lot of time to introduce a new character, right? Have something that they have to solve or overcome, and then final space, yeah, and then sort of wrap it up right in a nice tight package. But do think about doing something comedy based, right? That always works really well. um, you could do something like creepy pasta, you know, a little bit more horror can also work well because you can do like a little more of like a scary clip. We are going to work on lighting for our next project, right? Between the character design and getting the animation stuff out, we're going to work on a sci-fi hallway. I think I wrote interior hallway last time. I'm not, you know, I wasn't gonna force you guys to do sci-fi, but I think that is the better way to go just for the um, requirements of this project. So I'll show you guys what this project will look like by the end of today. At least what previous projects have looked like, right, in this vein. But all this is really, you know, these are just practice so that when we get to this point, we can confidently put everything together and get it looking good. I'm not opposed to you guys using these things for this, right? You can use all of this in your 30-second story animation. If you can come up with a way to use your character inside of a interior scene, that's cool. But you know, if you're going to make an outdoor scene or you're going to make some sort of different environment for your scene, right? You need to start thinking about that for your animation, right? Is it going to be worth it, or do you want to spend the time doing some environment modeling and learning some more about prop modeling and things, or do you want to just squeeze it all in one shot, right? And I understand, you know, not everybody wants to focus on art or wants to spend tens and tens of hours, you know, making character art and animation. So I do try to cherry pick the fun stuff that's going to appeal to everybody and that's going to benefit everybody moving forward into third year, right, when you're making your own games. But for the people who are really interested in character art, right, look for opportunities to do a bit extra so that you can really like flex a bit and stretch your muscles there. So looking at real world examples, right, looking at cartoons, looking at TikTok comedy I mentioned, like Instagram stories, right? Like look for stuff that works in this very short time scale. Yeah. Um, and even in longer cartoons or in movies and things, finding those little bits, those little quick um, scenes that work really well because they're short and sweet. Um, yeah, Final Space, like Matthew said, is a fun one. So look at what cartoons do, right? Comedy is going to give you a big leap, right, in storytelling because um, it's just more fun, right? And since we're all gamers here, we want to find the fun. So think about doing something funny with your character. If you have a more serious character, you can still do something comedic, or you can do something more serious, right? It's just going to be a bit trickier to pull off. All right, so what I want to look at is the next step in character design, right? Once we've got a kind of a general direction for our character, right? Or we have like a hero shot or just more of a technical breakdown of like what pieces are going to go on the character. Um, you want to start thinking about the technical side of bringing it into 3D. And so the hard part about that is to get all of these things right into 3D shapes. And this is another reason why um, putting big shapes on your character in the first place, right, is going to help some of that transition into the 3D space. Now, the front view is going to be our most important, right? That's our starting point for all of this um, because it tells us the most information about the character, including, their body type and proportions, which is going to be a tough one. But also like what kinds of accessories and personality they might have. Yeah. So the first goal, right, is to get a nice clean front view in that kind of A pose. I know we could T pose for dominance, but we're a little more comfortable these days doing a relaxed A pose for 3D modeling. The T pose just causes a little bit of warping around the shoulder area they found, and it creates these very like stiff space marine type of animations sometimes if you go full T pose in your character art. Once we have the front view, we have to start building the side view, which is going to feel like your brain is ripping apart internally a little bit because we're doing maybe things that we've never done in our brain before, right? Calculating 3D proportions and things from the side isn't as easy as it might look. How we do that, right, is we're going to start with the front view and we're going to draw horizontal lines along the major landmarks. And then we're going to squeeze in the um, those same, body parts within the proportions that we've set up in our front view. Yeah. Now, not everything is going to align 100%. But for the most part, it's going to be pretty close. Sorry, am I getting Discord messages? Sorry. Let me put on Do Not Disturb. All right, so at this point, right, even if we have a very rough sketch, right, it's just information for yourself, like we looked at last class. The hard part, right, is rendering the image, right? It's almost like taking your image from the editor and then rendering the final product, right? And this is what a lot of us struggle with, right? It's like we're not used to painting things, we're not used to shading, we're not sure, right, about like line quality and things across the board. All of that stuff is like techniques that we probably haven't tried out before, right? However, I like this analogy of art is like cooking in the kitchen, right? If you're scared because you've never cut an onion before, right? And you're never gonna cut an onion, like, okay, then you're never gonna be able to cut an onion. What are you gonna do? Okay, you can go to the store and maybe look for diced onions, right? But is it really gonna be that hard if millions of people have cut onions before? Is it that dangerous? Probably not, right? So it's worth picking up these small techniques in drawing, right? Whether it's just drawing a face or, like putting yeah, everything can be digital. I encourage digital work. Um, but if you know how to tackle small problems, right, whether it is how to draw a nose or how to create a gold effect using shading, right, like all of these are just very small techniques that artists pick up over time, right, through practice, through trial and error. Um, it's not that they get out of bed one day and they just know how to do it, right? It's all testing and practice. So right now, right, you're not coming in here as like world-class chefs, right? We don't have Gordon Ramsay in the room like crushing every single art project that there is. But you do have some experience, right? You might only know how to create or how to cook, chicken and beans in the kitchen. And if that's all you want to do, right? If you want to do Minecraft cooking, like that's fine, right? You can chase that and you can live with that. Um, but it is good practice to have some tools in your tool set or some ability, right, in the kitchen, in the drawing sphere, because so much of um, our industry is done through visual communication. Yeah, love how drawing a face is a small technique. Right. Well, drawing a smiley face is a small technique, right? And then drawing a 3D looking face, that's like it's like making a roast or something, Sunday roast. There's a lot of things that go into it, maybe, but if you break it down even further, right, it's like, okay, I have to roast the potatoes, I have to peel the potatoes, right, and then so sometimes, like, even if you start with the right ingredients, right, if you have all your reference in the kitchen, um, and kind of like, okay, I know what a roast potato should look like and what consistency it has, right? So you can sometimes figure out the little steps in between, right? But it is tough the first time, yeah. And you are going to make mistakes, especially the first few times, yeah. But it's like, okay, well, I don't have to physically eat my drawing, so uh, I can just toss it in the bin and never look at it again, right? Or think about it. So yeah, it does suck if you don't know how to draw or cook, right? And but it is something that you can get better at. That's the great thing, right? It's like it's not magic. It's not that people are born with it, right? It's that it's practice. Yeah. Some people are naturally better cooks, you can say, right? I'm certainly not a wizard in the kitchen. Um, but I recognized that I was lacking, right? So I went and taught myself a little bit and learned a little bit and did some trial and error and probably ate some food that was kind of gross because I cooked it for the first time and I didn't know what I was doing, right? It's not a big deal. We'll get to be better cooks, right? But we're not going to wake up one day and just have that be the norm. So what I want to show you guys is how I reached my character design, right? I think I'm just going to go ahead and stick with this guy. It wasn't a straightforward process, right? And it wasn't something that came right away. These were my first head sketches, right? I started out with a nice big um, A4 sheet of paper, right? In digital, A4 is quite big because of the dots per inch, right? You can zoom in quite close before you start to see the pixels. And I do recommend working at 100% um, zoom level, but not always super important. Let me grab my just right. The other thing, right, is your brush type will impact slightly the look of your work. So if you're like me, you like a little bit more sketchiness to your work, find one of these kind of charcoaly brushes with rough edges. If you want to be very clean and smooth, right, it becomes a little bit slower, right? You might have to like spend a little more time like getting your lines right. Oh, I don't have any lazy Zoom installed. Um, the important part, right, is just getting stuff down on paper at first. You're just kind of warming up when you first get started, and I'm glad to see that everybody managed to get through this hurdle, right? Because it isn't easy getting back on this horse. Um, so for me, I was like, oh, maybe since we're doing low poly, I'm just gonna make like a cube, and then maybe he's like an archon magic creature, and he's got like this energy inside of him holding him together, but he's made up of cubes. Right? And then I got distracted with some blue energy, and I started throwing it on everything. And I did this rabbit guy, and I was like, you know what, this isn't working. And I took a break. I was like, all right, that's enough for tonight. Then I came back the next day. I did like a little Frankenstein just to warm up with head shapes. Like I want to look for opportunities where the simple kinds of shapes can come through in a character. Um, and this is what we're going to work on a little bit today as well. So I made creepy Cornetto Krang over here from Ninja Turtles a little bit, and then did some weird like face stuff, and then I stumbled across this shape. Right, I was like, all right, well, I liked the splitting kind of notion of in here, and the angularness of these shapes, but it wasn't working with the all square all the time, right? All cubes. So I took that center shape and then I made this monkey looking guy here. Maybe that's some King Kong uh, coming through, right? With all the King Kong versus Godzilla marketing. So once I was here, right, I was like, oh, now I can understand a bit about this character, right? Even just looking at the head, I can extrapolate some information about, what kind of body type this character might have and how they might move. Um, so I went from here and went straight into kind of a knight-like character. Um, Gave him some bulky armor, right? And then what I was realizing though is like I'd taken this shape here. Oh, let me go black. Um, it's just kind of like I guess it's a triangle with the ends cut off, right? So to make it a little bit more squarish. Um, and then the internal shapes, right, which are these diamond kind of or stretched squares. They're a little bit more stretched. And look, and then implanted those things in various places on the character, right? Whether it is like finding the squares on the chest or and combining them, right? So having some repeating shapes is good to have. If you find something that's working for you, right? Like look for the shapes that are giving you some sort of gut feeling, that some sort of reaction, yeah. And look to repeat those, but then also look to balance them, right? Because the shape is very kind of like strong internally. It feels like you could roll this down a mountain and it would still have the same shape at the end, right? Because it's got all these hard edges. It feels very like reinforced from the inside, right? So it gives that impression of a strong character and a heavy character too, right? So I wanted to offset that a little bit, um, and I thought about the character him from what is that show called, Powerpuff Girls, who is like a very scary looking devil character. Do I have the head shape 7 is open? I thought I had one with all of my reference that I went back and found later. Um, so initially I was like, oh, maybe I'll just give him like stiletto legs, where like he just had points on his legs, right? Just to kind of offset all of that heaviness on the top. Um, and make him feel a little bit more delicate at the bottom, right? And a little bit more speedy, right? I wanted to make sure that he didn't feel too slow and heavy, yeah, because I could just hang out in this kind of space where he is very slow and heavy and knightly, you know, and just give him like big old chunky knight boots, right, and things where um, he's going to start to feel very like weighed down, like a diver, right? And if he is dragging his feet around all the time, he's not going to have this kind of explosive energy that I wanted. Just in this face, right? Like this shape here kind of contrasts the strength by being more like of an outwards explosion shape, right? It's like this sort of thing where it's almost could be like an explosion outwards, right? Rather than, so it's like all of the strength on the outside, um, but all this energy on the inside, right? It's almost like it's being contained within some sort of, within his armor, yeah? So look for ways that you can contrast the shapes that are on there with something a little bit softer or different. And I did the same thing with the weapon that he has, right? Like I could give him, if I had stuck with very, like, you know, a slow and heavy character all around, I would have given him like a big old like warhammer or a mallet or something, you know, just to, but it ends up feeling like too heavy, like he's just like really, you know, going to be slow moving. Um, and it didn't really gel with what I wanted, you know, with this kind of monkey face here, where when I think of like a monkey, even if he's in armor, right, he's going to be agile, he's going to be jumping around and like a little bit scary. It ate mushroom soup, and that's how you got your inspiration. Nice. Necropolis character for my character. I don't know the Necropolis character. Back to design a character in relation to your short stories. And a solid piece of you can do characters based on stories. I haven't seen Necropolis for some reason. Maybe I should look that one up, or you guys can show me where to find it. Alrighty, so it's good to have a little bit of those contrasting elements, right, within your character. You want to give them a weakness and a little bit of vulnerability, even in your strongest of strong characters, right? Think of somebody like Superman, right? Man of Steel, can lift a building and jump building in a single bound, blah blah blah, right? Has all these powers and all this strength and everything, but also has a vulnerable side, right? Like also is kind of susceptible to human emotion, right? And has like a little bit troubled relationships, bit of a mama's boy, you know, according to who is it? Not Zack Snyder, but the other guy who stepped in to finish his movie, Justice League. So give your characters a weakness as well as strengths, right? Like they can have these strengths. In my case, you know, my character is going to be strong and agile, but maybe with these spindly little legs, right? Like maybe he's got a bit of a weakness here. If Johnny Cobra Kai comes in here and sweeps the leg, this guy is gonna be flat on his back, yeah. So think about the physicality of your character, how they move, right? What their personality is, because we want this stuff to come across in our walk cycle, which is going to be what we end up doing with this character, right? Is we're going to do a little bit of rigging. We're going to also use Mixamo for rigging, though, just so that people who are in, you know, more of a rush can get things done quickly. But I do want you guys to animate a bit. It is often tough squeezing the animation side into this this course. So I want to make sure that in the very least we do a run or a walk cycle that we could use in a game, yeah, so that we can actually put this character in game. So in that regard, right, we need to think about how the character is going to be moving. And in my case, right, he's going to have a bit of a hopping, dainty run because of his spike legs. I mean, I might go back and change the spike legs. Last night, I was like, maybe I should just put feet on him and call it. You know, like just give him some proper legs. All right. So once I figured out the big shapes that I wanted to use, right, I wanted to give him a personality pose and something that's kind of the opposite of this technical measurement exercise, right? Of figuring out his proportions from the front. And I wanted to do something like, okay, how would this character move in battle, right? Like if they're all set up to fight, right? They're wearing armor. They've got this like kind of scary look to them. He's obviously a fighter. How do they actually move in a fight? What do they fight with, right? So the lance was also um, an attempt to balance out all of this weight and strength in and heavy, sort of shapes within that character with something a little bit more spindly and straight, and long rather than being short and wide. Camille from League of Legends. Yeah, the other thing I don't know if Camille has like blade feet, but I was thinking of like the Blade Runner. Yeah, blades for feet. Yeah. Um, in real life there are amputees and people born without legs that have those carbon fiber legs, which would be another choice, right? Potentially, especially if I was doing a sci-fi or a futuristic character. But not every problem needs to be solved. Sometimes you just don't feel like drawing feet, and you can be like, well, that's my one thing that I'm just gonna give myself to like throw it out the window and not have to worry about it for this project, right? If I hate drawing feet and I hate modeling feet, maybe I'll just give myself a break and like ignore the feet. Totally fine with that. Totally fine with you sticking a paper bag on your character's head and just being like, that's his personality. He wears the paper bag everywhere, right? Just so you can get away with not having to draw the face, right? But you can't put a paper bag on his face and put paper bags on his hands and then like have him hopping around in a paper bag, like it has to stop. So you have to, no, Connor, I really like your design. So that's why I was thinking of the paper bag. Because it can be a stylistic choice, right? And it does have personality to it, right? Like it gives that character a bit of mystery. So look for those opportunities to withhold information in a certain sense from the viewer, from the player, right? Yeah, it's a box. So not everything has to be painted on their face, right? Sometimes those can be a little bit too generic or too predictable characters. Think of like Space Marines, right? Like they're expendable, they're generic, right? What makes one Space Marine that's going to be the hero, right, different to all the rest? In, say, if we're looking at Aliens, right, which is the progenitor of all of our Space Marine culture in games and elsewhere, right? It's Ripley that gets out alive, right? The uh, what is she? She's a pilot, cargo ship hauler pilot, right, in the movie. And then there are all these space marines that just end up dropping like flies, right? And she's the one that ends up standing tall, right? Even though these guys seem to be made for the situation, it's more like they're so sort of feature built. They're built for one purpose, right? That if anything, like this character, right? If anything can sweep the leg, they topple over. So don't feel like you have to make your character absolutely perfect and flawless in every way, right? Give them some sort of flaws, give them some sort of vulnerability or weak spot, right? Um, Not something super obvious, right? It's not Zelda. You don't have to have a big glowy ball on the top of their head that you're supposed to shoot, right? But think about what might take them down, right? Or what way they might be vulnerable if somebody approaches them in a way that they're not used to. Yeah. Warhammer Titan. Warhammer's around longer than Alien. Alien wasn't it 1979? The first Alien. When was Warhammer made? The 70s. Wow. Yeah, I mean those guys were ahead of their time for sure. I mean, that Warcraft was all stolen from them too, right? Like Blizzard didn't want to pay for the license, so they went and ripped off the universe a little bit. Plot armor. Yeah, that's one thing you kind of want to avoid sometimes is plot armor, right? Invincible characters or characters that that you know are never going to get touched. Um, Power armor stays on. Yeah. Keep the helmet on, baby. Come to bed. Keep the helmet on. So so yeah, looking at your guys' characters, right? Like I think we got some really good variety, like a lot of good jumping off points. You guys put a lot of thought into these, which I appreciate. Yeah, and even if you're at the early stages where you're just figuring out, right? You're still kind of like trying to work towards a shape that jumps out at you, right? That's totally fine. Um, just keep putting a little bit more time into it. Yeah, like every little bit of time is going to help take it to the next little technique that we have to cover. So if we're going to, that's for the year ones. So if we're going to take our character now into an orthographic view, right, which is something that we need to do, excuse me, in 3D, I'm going to give you guys some examples of, oh, where am I? I thought I had it over here. Where is it? Project 3. I'll give you guys some examples of orthographic character designs, right? Which I don't mind if you use as the basis for your character and that you're going to put like your own accessories and things, right? Because I know that anatomy is very tough and it takes a lot of study, right, to do something like this. Um, if you want to take the body type, right, which comic book characters obviously make life a bit easier because they are all in spandex, right? So we know their body type immediately. And if you want to take something, you know, that's already made and then turn it into something custom, right? I'm not opposed to that, right? If because it's only one step along a long process. Yeah, this isn't going to be our final result. So I don't mind if you're using this just as kind of a quick trampoline to get to the next stage, right? That's totally fine. Try to avoid tracing is my advice for that though. If you trace right over the top of something, you're going to get nothing out of it. So what my art teachers always taught me was to put your reference next to a blank space and then draw your own version next to it, right? That way you're still solving problems and you're still practicing your line work a little bit. Plus, you know, everything goes through the filter of you and your hand, right? So the problem with doing things like photo bashing and just throwing like accessories and things up on a pre-made character is that it becomes obvious that there are multiple sources being used and that things are just kind of cobbled together into this bundle. Whereas if we're forced to filter everything through ourselves and channel it out, right, that normalizes everything to the same style, even if our style is, you know, in its early days or is a bit weaker, whatever. Like everybody has to live with that pain of not being, you know, Leonardo da Vinci every time that you pick up the pencil. I'm sure Da Vinci himself suffered with that because he was not popular in his day, right? Um, so our goal, right, is more to just keep working along the process, pick up some skills along the way, right? Another thing I recommend doing at this stage, though, just to make sure that we're not cheating ourselves too much, right? That we're not kind of like hiding things from ourselves. Even if you do have things um, like mine, big helmet on the character that hides the face or something like that. Um, what you should start to do is to break down, you know, if there are any shapes on there that you're not quite sure how they look from other angles, right? Since we're going to be doing a turnaround, um, for instance, my crazy like head shape, it's like, okay, this is what it looks like from the front. Do I know what it looks like from the side? Well, I know that I want the eyes to look really angry from the side, right? But do I really know what that shape is necessarily? So for me, I went into Maya and played around with like just helmet shapes. And this wasn't like right away, right? This was about an hour or so of looking at things and bringing in my drawing. and trying to work out that one. So this one I did just because I knew that I'd kind of faked it from the front, right? I knew that I liked this shape, this like triangular explosion looking shape, right? Um, but I wasn't quite sure of where all the angles were and so on, right? So I did come into 3D and start to try and work out some of that. This way, now when if I want to do another action shot or something, right, I can just move towards that angle in Maya, right? Take a screenshot or a render. I like the screenshot just because it's fast. And then see, exactly how that shape might look in space. Yeah. It's not a necessary step, and not everyone's going to need to do that. But if you feel like maybe you're not sure what a side view will look like, right? Sometimes your brain just thinks of it easier when you have the ability to go into 3D, but don't feel like that's always 100% necessary. All right, so let's look at doing an orthographic view. All right, so what we would need is our front view of our character. Mine is not finalized or anything, but I've got some art there, and it's a good enough jumping off point. Where are we at? Looks like it's 11, so let's take a 15-minute break and come back at 11:11. Yeah, and we'll work on. Well, I'll show you guys the techniques for kind of getting this process started. So that way next week we'll be ready to kind of take a first stab at a 3D block out of our character. So 15-minute break. I'll see you guys in a few.